All right, welcome to the March edition of the Disability Ministry Video Roundtable from Key Ministry. I'm Beth from Key Ministry. My colleague, Catherine Boyle, is here. She's waving. She's the Director of Mental Health Ministry for Key Ministry. And today, our topic is on service dogs versus therapy dogs versus emotional support animals. So what, as ministry leaders and, churches, what do we need to know? So I'm going to start this off by saying I am not the expert, and you've probably realized that with these disability ministry video roundtables. I pick topics that I want to learn about. So I am really excited that you all have joined today. And so we want to hear from everybody. We particularly want to hear from people who have life experience with this. I do have like some definitions, and I know some things, but I'd like to open it up to all of you. Incidentally, a few years back, I was talking with a church who was kind of questioning this because they were having some situations at their church. And the pastor said to me, yeah, they didn't teach us about this in seminary. So I'm glad we're having this discussion today so we can take this info back to our churches. So who would like to begin?
I nominate Kayla because I think
I was going to do the same thing, but I was, going to let her do it. But
well, hi, everyone. My name is Kayla Eastman. I'm the Ministry Operations Manager at Soul City Church, which is located in the West Loop of Chicago. So I live in Chicago, Illinois. As you can see behind me, I am a service dog handler myself. When I was 20 years old, I suffered a traumatic brain injury, which exacerbated some existing conditions. And I have been utilizing a service dog for the last 4 years. So as you can imagine, being on staff of a church and being a service dog handler, I have navigated a lot of the confusion around this situation, not only with my own church, but also churches that I've attended as I travel a lot and do some consulting and things like that. So if you want, I can give a little bit of like my experience with churches as a service dog handler. A lot of you probably know service dogs that have public access rights that are protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act. However, churches end up being kind of a weird gray zone. As you probably know, churches are exempt from following the ADA. So it ends up being kind of a moral, ethical debate rather than a legal debate in terms of churches and service dog access. I cannot fully participate in worship and the church experience without my service dog. And so obviously, for me to be able to have access within my faith community is really important for my service dog to have full access there as well. It gets even more complicated when you get into realms like therapy dogs and emotional support dogs, both of whom do not have public access rights per the ADA. Therapy dogs have specific training and go into places like hospitals and schools and different programs where they are specifically invited to perform their purpose. So their purpose is to provide comfort for a large amount of people versus an emotional support animal whose purpose is to provide comfort for one person. Therapy dogs have typically very extensive training and are typically certified through an organization. Emotional support animals don't require any specific training. There's a lot of misinformation out there in terms of the difference between emotional support animals and service animals, especially when you get into realms like psychiatric service animals, where all of the lines are pretty gray. I've experienced several access denials in churches purely as a result of lack of knowledge. People not really having encountered a service dog before, or they've had a bad experience with someone attempting to get access with an untrained animal. My dog has 2 years of formal training in addition to like basic obedience training. So he has passed all sorts of public access tests and things like that. Service dogs don't have to be program trained. Mine was partially program trained, partially owner trained. Service dogs can be fully owner trained. And I will add, because there's a lot of confusion around this, that there are no formal legal certifications in the United States. There are no ID cards that are issued to service dogs. Some programs will give you like a graduation certificate, but I go a lot of places, including churches, that ask for my paperwork, which is not a thing. So that's kind of like the base level.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So much good information here. So I want to, and I want everybody to be able to ask questions, but I want to start again with just like some of the total basic information. So I want to define the 3 types of like categories here. And I actually have some information. So somebody that has a service dog emailed me like some link, like I did a little bit of research. Okay. But she's not able to be on the call yet. But so a service dog is a dog that has been individually trained to perform work or task to assist a person with a disability. So like you said, like a specific person, specific task, very well trained. Okay. So an animal who provides comforts like a therapy dog, like as you mentioned, for a group of people, or emotional support animal for a particular person, does not qualify as a service dog under the ADA. Only service dogs and their handlers are allowed in public places where pet dogs aren't allowed. Also, a service dog must be under control and behave in a safe, non-aggressive manner at all times. Otherwise, they can be removed from a business. So that's the information that is kind of like the official wording on some things. That's interesting what you said about there is no like certificate or like a like documentation or whatever. Okay, so you know how like Google and Facebook are like freaky and start giving you information when you start looking at things. Yeah. So suddenly I'm getting ads for you can get a certification or something for your dog to be a whatever, like a emotional support animal, I suppose. So clearly someone's in the business of producing certifications, which that's kind of crummy, but anyway. Okay. So would anybody like to ask a question or raise a situation? Like, let's start the conversation. And so it could be a question for Kayla, or it could be, if you're seeing a situation, either you're experiencing personally or that you're seeing at your church. And just feel free to unmute or raise your hand.
I've got a question.
Yeah, Ryan.
And it's far less about the legal requirements, the technical nature of it. But I was mentoring a young man a while back who had autism, and he abused the thing he always said was, they're not legally allowed to ask me what this dog is for. And so he would just bring his dog that was just a dog everywhere with him. And he said, they're not legally allowed to ask. Not legally. I was like, you're kind of lying though, by implying that it's a service dog when it's, you just want to bring your dog, which I get. I love dogs. And I wasn't 100% clear even on the difference. He's like, it's an emotional support animal. It's a support dog. I said, but is that allowed? He said, but they're not allowed to ask. So it's kind of a pastoral question mixed in with how to bring some legal reasoning into it. Anybody have any thoughts? Because yeah.
Melissa, go ahead and unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. And no, this is not a cell phone commercial. Okay. I've been a service dog handler for 30 years, actually more than that. I'm currently without a service dog because she had to retire due to a head injury. Your friend is wrong. They are allowed to ask certain questions. The first question is that a service dog? Yes or no? Do you have, is it specifically trained to accommodate your disability? Yes or no? That's it. So yes, they are allowed to ask, and that's it. You do not have to discuss what your disability is. When I was still fully ambulatory. I'm now what's known as a partially ambulatory wheelchair user. So I went from a Newfoundland to a Dachshund, one extreme to the other, 200 pounds to 14 pounds. My first service dog was to help me with, or my first two service dogs were mobility assist dogs. They also detected petit mal seizures, low blood sugar, high blood pressure, low blood pressure, and helped me mitigate pretty significant complex PTSD. So, and you have all that. Now, it was pretty self-explanatory when I had the large dog and I was still walking. People were pretty cool with that. I will say that dogs will be dogs. They will screw up. They will do things wrong. One Sunday morning, my 200-pound dog fell off the choir riser in the middle of church. She went to sleep and was on her back asleep and rolled right off the choir riser in the middle of the sermon. Fortunately, it was hilarious. I was mortified when it happened. She also decided on Easter Sunday morning.
Was she okay?
Oh, she was fine.
Okay,
She was fine.
okay.
It just made a really loud clattering noise. On Easter Sunday morning, she decided that she wanted to help my friend sing a duet to Were You There? I had to clamp my both hands around her snout too, because she just decided
when the spirit moves you, you gotta.
Exactly. When I went to the wheelchair full time and I I didn't need the big dog anymore, and I had gotten married to a man who was not prepared for something that slobbered and shed. So we went to the Dachshund, and both of my second set of service dogs have been Dachshunds, and they've been amazing. But with having the small dog, because she's cute, because Dachshunds are mouthy and all that good stuff, people wanted way more information than they were entitled to. And anytime that we would go to a new church or I would be in a new situation, I would just very calmly say all my dogs always wore a vest, even though it's not required by law. My dogs always wear a vest. The hardest thing, and this is something that needs to be addressed in a church situation, is do not interact, period, full stop. I actually had somebody walk up to me at church one Sunday morning and take my dog out of my lap without my permission because they love dogs and wanted to pet my dog. Yeah. Ryan is shaking his head and Kayla is
That's not even a good idea, even if it's not a service dog.
Right.
You just don't do that.
Right.
But, okay.
But little kids have to learn that you can't do that. The funniest thing one of my dachshunds ever did was to crawl out of my lap during a wedding in which I was the matron of honor and march up and lay down on the kneeling bench between the bride and groom during the middle of the ceremony before I could scream stop. So that's the funniest thing that they ever did at church. But I say all that to say this. Oh, and then one other quick story. We had the awesome privilege when we lived in New York City of attending Redeemer Presbyterian, which is Tim Keller's church. It met at the time at Hunter College, East Side Sunday morning, and they flipped out after the first Sunday that we were there with the dog because Hunter College did not want a dog on their campus, period, full stop. And because I've done disability policy and law for most of my professional career, I was not going to let that happen. And Redeemer came to us and said, they've told us that if we allow your dog to come to church, that we will have to give up our rental contract. I said, no, you won't. They're lying to you. They're bullying you. They're looking for an excuse to get rid of you. So the next Sunday, when we got there for church, there were 14 New York City police officers and 16 Hunter College security guards waiting for us to see what this dog was going to do. To her credit, all 12 pounds of Lucy walked in that building like a boss through the police officers, and there was actually even a police dog there. And she just kind of looked around at everybody like, hello, it's nice to see you. And just kind of walked in like a boss. And the police captain looked at me and he said, this is why we're here today? I said, yep. And they said, we're going to have a chat with Hunter College. And the Hunter College police officer captain looked at me and he said, I'm so sorry. He said, we didn't know. We didn't know. And so that led to me being able to do a full education series with
there.
both Hunter College and with the New York City Police Department on service dogs and invisible disabilities, visible disabilities. And I also have a traumatic brain injury as well, Kayla. So I feel you on that. And service dogs can be life-changing, but when people don't know the rules, it can be hard. And I find that the best way to deal with it is just to be head on about it and be your own advocate. But for people who are not able to be their own advocate, we in the ministry end need to know the rules and not be afraid to stick by those rules. And Kayla, you were awesome. I was listening. I had to walk away from my computer for a second to grab coffee and string cheese for lunch. So you did awesome, because one of the big misconceptions with service dogs today is that they have to have certification of some kind. And that's just, that's people making money. That's just people making money.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I hope some of what I've said is helpful.
No, this is great information. And again, it's so helpful to hear from people who, have this life experience. So yes, we have a hand up. So Oriana, go ahead and unmute and join the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, my computer camera is not working. So I'm from Albania. Here, service dogs is something new to me. And the reason why I joined is because here we have a lot of street dogs.
Okay.
And it's not like we have a law. So probably some of you are thinking, your church doesn't have a problem. So we don't have to kind of weigh what to do or not. At the Jonathan Center, we care for children with Down syndrome and various diagnoses. And eventually, we also use that platform as we provide professional services to reach the families with the gospel and invite them at church. So I was really curious, service dogs or therapy dogs, is this a nice to have? Is this a must? What are the biggest benefits? Because like my ideal side is thinking we could do a two-side intervention. So probably save the street dogs, train them, and then provide service dogs to our community and start to raise awareness and educate, and then hopefully eventually regulations and laws and policies can be influenced. And I understand it might be a long journey, but I was just curious, how helpful is this?
What an interesting question to think about. So yes, so Albania has, like, maybe they don't have service dogs. So what are your thoughts, everyone? So what are your thoughts on maybe changing the narrative there a little bit and training, saving some of the street dogs and training them to either be service dogs or perhaps therapy dogs? Like, I'm thinking at the Jonathan Center, maybe there's a therapy dog that can interact with, the students that are under your care. Any thoughts? Would anybody like to unmute themselves and share?
Thanks a lot.
I think that's a great idea. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Melissa. That's an amazing idea. And as far as the nice to have, must have, for many people, service dogs are a last resort when nothing else has worked. And that's my situation. I'm autistic and I have a bacterial brain infection, and we needed the emotional support aspect, but we are training my 11-month-old standard poodle is in training, and I'm doing most of it myself, which is hard. And so that's the other thing I will say is training is hard, especially if you're talking about street dogs who are not socialized. The biggest part of training a service dog is the socialization. My girl started her training at 3 days old. The breeders do early neurological stimulation so that they're not easily startled, or when they are startled, they recover quickly. Street dogs typically have a bit more eager fight or flight response. So I would say this is an amazing idea. You want to get some really good dog trainers that do, it's called Lima, least invasive, most affirming or something. There's a,
Kayla, I'm watching Kayla mouth the words, but I can't make it out.
It's least invasive, minimally aversive, meaning you don't use a lot of negative punishment in your training.
Right. Because then you get into like different dog training methods and everything. So you would want like a dog trainer who is very familiar with rehabilitating street dogs and then training them. You really want to make sure that you're taking care of the dog. My dog she will be a service dog in training until she's at least 2 years old, because that's when dogs are fully developed. Even though right now, aside from her over-eagerness, she's very dog social. She's very mature for her age, and she's doing really well. At the same time, she's not fully developed. It's unfair to ask that of her. And so in the same case, if you're asking dogs who were born on the street, they're not socialized, they haven't been trained that, yeah, noises happen and that's not a big deal, then you could be putting the dog in a uncomfortable situation, which could potentially be dangerous. And that's the big reason why it's important for people to know where they can and cannot take their pet, because a pet will get stressed in certain environments and that will cause them to potentially be violent. And that's how a lot of service dogs get killed or attacked and whatnot.
Yeah. So I actually have some statistics on that from my little research here. So 95% of service dog users report encountering poorly trained, out of control dogs in places where pets are not allowed. So again, this is putting the trained service dog at risk because they're in an environment where untrained dogs aren't supposed to be. Oh, good. We have another visual over here. Excellent. And 97% report that they feel the issue of untrained dogs has increased or stayed the same in recent years. So this is an issue that's not dwindling. It's still happening. It's possibly increasing. 1 in 3 report that their genuine service dog, so like the generally trained service dog, has been snapped at and or bitten during these encounters. And then over 3/4 of teams meaning trained service dog and the person that they're with, 3/4 of those teams feel that untrained dogs in places pets aren't allowed has negatively impacted their independence and quality of life. So that's pretty high. So I want to take a minute to, first of all, Jennifer, your puppy's getting a lot of love in the chat. Also, Melissa has said if she can be of assistance to anyone with the service dog issue, please reach out to her at, it's M or T. No, I know your name's not pronounced like I think it is. But now I can't remember.
Ortiz to rhyme with quiz.
Okay. I knew I had it wrong, but
no,
I
you're fine.
The way it was. So it's MORTIZ at nationalcenter.org. Yes, and Kayla, do you want me to share your email with everyone or? Yeah, okay. So Kayla's email is Kayla Eastman, so KAYLA Eastman at soulcitychurch.com, SOUL citychurch.com. Catherine's sharing that specific breeds are often seen in the US working as service dogs. Golden retrievers or labs and standard poodles. yeah, lot of times golden retrievers are the therapy dogs for sure.
Right. And any dog can be trained to, any breed can be trained to be a service dog. It doesn't, like a Newfie was good for me because it was 200 pounds and because she had a natural protective instinct.
Mhm.
And to, like, for instance, there was a fire in the building where I was living at the time, and I fell going down the steps. She grabbed me by the forearm and kept going.
Yeah.
A smaller breed would not
Yeah,
have
your
been able to
dachshunds
do
would have
that.
a hard time with that one.
No, she would have stood there and barked until somebody else came.
Right, right. And I
Um,
know like the standard poodles are really good for people who have like balance issues.
mhm.
I know that's a good
Mhm.
breed. Carrie has her hand up. Carrie.
All right. So I just have two quick follow-up questions and then just a statement. But Melissa, when you were talking about service dogs and the clarification, you said there were two questions that are okay to ask. One was, is it a service dog? And was the second, is it trained to accommodate your needs? Is that what
Yes.
the second one? Okay, great.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that I had
Yep.
that right.
Yep.
And then are there requirements for like vests or anything? Like that's something that's nice to have, but it's not a requirement. Is that right?
It's nice to have. I mean, like most people are used to seeing eye dogs who are in harness, and if a dog's in harness, not to interact with it. Because Annie Oakley and her predecessor Lucy are dachshunds, they did not wear harnesses. Obviously, that would be silly. And so the vest just kind of gives people, and I mean, Kayla's laughing. Can you see this little
I'm
bitty
figuring they
harness for
would
these
tip
little bitty
over
dogs?
if they had a
Exactly. And so the vests help with identification and with people kind of stopping you to keep people from yelling at you for bringing your dog into a public place.
Okay.
And that's been real helpful. And I will say that Tim Keller led the way of being the pastor who really advocated for service dogs in PCA churches. And he has been amazing. Side note, pray for him. He's in treatment for pancreatic cancer and it's not going well. So just pray. But those two questions, if you go to the DOJ website, if you type in service dog questions, DOJ, Department of Justice has everything you can and cannot ask. And while churches are somewhat exempt from that, the cases have been made that if you don't meet in a church building, that there's no exemption. Also, if you have AA meetings, Boy Scout meetings, if your church is open to public events, you are not exempt.
Okay.
So, and if you guys ever need an attorney, I have a list of great attorneys who are Christian friendly or faith friendly, I should say. They work with both, mostly synagogues and churches on this and other disability issues.
Yeah. And then I'll just say too, this has been really, really helpful personally, not only as a church leader to know like how to accommodate other pastors within our church, but for us personally, my son is 20 years old and has intractable epilepsy. And about 4 years ago, a family at our church had a dog that they had trained to be with their son, their adopted son, who has fetal alcohol syndrome. The son had moved into a group home, couldn't take the dog with. They were going to incorporate the dog as a family dog, but she got really sad. She was not being utilized the way that she was trained to be. So they had approached us, as we've known them forever, to say, hey, we know Andrew has seizures. Would this be something you're interested in? My husband's like, no, no dogs. But we did have conversation and we took her on a Friday, and our intention was that we would have her with us for the weekend and then we'd make a decision come Monday. Saturday morning, friends, Andrew is sitting on the couch and this dog, her name is Suki. She jumps up on the couch and is licking the left side of Andrew's head and licking. I had no idea. We had an appointment on Monday and I mentioned it to the doctor here. He was having seizures and we didn't, I mean, we knew that he was having seizures, but didn't know at that time. And like, yeah, it's just amazing to me. So truly, I've never known what to call her. The family
She's a
let us know
service
that
dog.
okay. They told us that she was a trained therapy dog. So that's kind of the language we've used. But I've even had confusion within our own family of, we don't take her outside in public because she doesn't do supports in that way for him. But she supports him just incredibly at home. So I think I've even had confusion within our own family of how to identify her and how to then identify her outside of our houses. So this has been so incredible. Thank you.
Wow, that's I got chills when you
Yeah.
described that. That's I mean, Sounds like a service animal. to me.
I need to
I
kiss the top of Natasha's head.
Yeah, yeah. So this is Natasha. She is learning deep pressure therapy right now. So I get sometimes just shaky and anxiety, and yeah, she's learning to do deep pressure therapy while I'm sitting, so she can do it also in my wheelchair. So she says hello. She's more interested in the chicken in my hand. But yeah, I wanted to add that the ADA, just generally, but also in regards to service dogs, is vague on purpose, or it's
Mhm,
overly, it's least restrictive.
mhm,
So the vesting, not everybody can afford a vest, or not some dogs are gear shy. They can do their
mhm.
job well, they just don't enjoy the gear. The two questions, like, I don't need to be giving my private medical information to anybody who thinks that they need it.
Mm-mm.
Also, oh, there was one more thing I was going to say. Oh man, I forgot. I feel like it was a good point too.
Hopefully it'll come back to you.
Yes.
I'm gonna,
One thing I'll add just really quick is around the 2 questions, it's a great tell whether a dog is a service dog or a companion or emotional support dog. Service dog handlers who have been handling a service dog for any period of time are aware that those are the 2 questions they can be asked. And so like, I know what my answers are to those questions. So if you were to ask me like, is your dog a service dog? Yes. What tasks is your dog trained to perform? He's a medical alert, cardiac support, and emotional and mobility support dog. Like, I'm very quick with that answer. And if someone's like, oh, he helps with my anxiety, like that's usually a tell of like, it's not a trained service animal. So if you utilize those 2 questions as like quoted in the ADA, service dog handlers are going to have an answer for you.
that's good. I like that. All right.
Also, though, keeping in mind that, like, with psychiatric conditions, some people are non-speaking. If someone asks me that, I will probably be unable to speak depending on the circumstances around me. So we always vest Natasha. So she's in California. The laws are different, and so it's always what's the least restrictive law. So in California, if the dog is a service dog in training and is able to do one task and within your control, then they have public access rights. It's not the same everywhere. So we always have patches on her. And so I will point to a patch if I need to. So yes, I 100% agree with you, Kayla. We are aware and we're like waiting for that like person to ask you or not give you access. But it can also be very stressful.
Something I do is I actually have printed out the DOJ regs and I hand them to people. If they get really bully with me, I just say, you know what, take it up with the DOJ. I mean, I try to be a little nicer about it than that, but I don't know, I'm not very nice. To quote Lynn Heibel's, nice girls don't change the world, but good women do. And I'd like to think I'm a good woman, but I'm not a nice girl. So I just kind of hand off the paper and go, here you go. Yeah,
well, and it's
here you
hard
go.
to fit, too many badges on a dachshund's vest. So, Catherine has her hand up.
Yes, I did actually. So several years ago, and at my church, I'm in Virginia, I formed an organization for mental health ministry before I joined Key Ministry. And that's how I got connected to Steve or Dr. Gersovich. And he came to this event. He was the keynote speaker. And so, all the people are coming in who are coming to the event. And here comes a lady with her service dog. Totally fine. At the same time, here comes a lady who absolutely freaks out because she's terrified of dogs. And so, thinking on the fly, I just said to one of them, you go that way and you go that way. And so they sat on other sides of the room. This was the only time I've had to deal with something like that. And, looking at mental health kinds of ministry, people who are afraid of dogs tend to have had negative experiences with dogs. I had a family member who was really savagely attacked by a neighbor's dog that we had lived by for 10 years at that point. It was just no rhyme or reason why that happened. So I totally get why some people are afraid of dogs. So I'm just curious to hear, for those of you who either use a dog for, whatever purpose, or, are working in a ministry setting where dogs are used, how have you handled these kinds of fears, objections, concerns that sometimes come up?
That's a great question. Kayla, do you have Kayla and then Melissa?
I do, yeah. I encounter this regularly between fear and allergies. I'll start by saying that neither are grounds for denying access to a service dog. So put that out there first. However, anyone who utilizes a service dog is just trying to exist in the world. And so I'm not trying to make anyone's life harder. So if I encounter someone who's afraid of my dog, who's allergic to my dog, I want them to receive an accommodation for their fear or allergy just as much as I need to receive an accommodation for my service dog. And so I see it a lot flying, actually. I'll get seated next to someone who's allergic to a dog. They can find another seat. We can figure out another flight situation if it's really that terrible of an allergy. I would argue if it's a life-threatening allergy, should probably have an accommodation on file with the airline prior to getting on the flight. But we just are trying to go about our day. I'm not like trying to scare anyone. So I would much rather, especially in a ministry setting, someone make me aware of like, hey, there's another person present at this event who's very scared of dogs. Can we try to make it so that you can avoid each other? And I'm more than happy to go a little bit out of my way to make that happen. Because yeah, at the end of the day, like my life is hard enough utilizing a service dog. I'm not trying to make anyone else's life harder. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
And, I have to say, so Kayla's coming to the conference in April, and she reached out like months ago.
It was like the day after registration opened.
Yeah. And she contacted me to say, I have a service dog. Is that an issue? Which of course it's not an issue for us at all, but she was like amazing in like letting us know the facts. And anyway, so I think you're awesome.
Thank you.
I taught school for 10 years and mostly middle school and high school. And I was very clear at the beginning of the year, and that was when I was still walking, and I had Misha and then Gracie. And I was very clear at the beginning of the year, this is the situation. The dog is there to help me. If your son or daughter has an allergy or a fear, please let me know and I will accommodate. And what I did with my kids who had allergies, I insisted on an EpiPen being in my room in case something happened, and that was helpful. Another thing, and the school bought them and kept them in my office or in my desk for me in a locked thing. With the fear, I would just make sure that if I knew I had a student who was afraid of dogs, that Misha and Gracie stayed in downstay mode for the entire class. And I would stay either in my scooter or sit on my desk to teach so that there was no danger of me falling. And I would meet individually with these kids, and I would say, talk to me about this, tell me, and almost without exception, by the end of the year, the fear was overcome because my dogs were well behaved. And it was a great thing, but that's not always the case. And so I agree with Kayla. We're just trying to go about our lives. You go one way, they go the other. If it means a child has to switch classes, that's what it means. I think if we can foster as service dog handlers and as Christ followers, if we can foster this idea that we all need to be at the foot of the cross. And sometimes that means making room for people who make you uncomfortable for whatever reason, or who don't want you there for whatever reason. And it's not fun and it's not easy. And how do I want to say this? For me, as the person with a disability, I don't make it all about me as far as being the one who gives in for everything, but I do try to make other people as comfortable as possible in the situation. And I will pretty much answer whatever questions asked that I'm comfortable with. So, and I'll be 57 on Friday, and in 57 years of living with a disability, I've gotten pretty comfortable. But for someone like, Kayla, who's has a newer injury or a newer disability, I guess I would say don't push for answers. It's not your business. And just because you're interested doesn't mean it's your business. And no, it is not the spirit of Christian charity to make it your business so that you can know specifically how to pray. That's just, I'm loving it. Kayla's eyes got big. I don't know, Kayla, if you've had this experience, and Jennifer, if you've had this experience of people asking way too many questions about details so that they can know specifically how to pray, which is translation.
Some people ask if they can come pray for me as soon as I walk into the building with my service dog. It's especially when you have a disability that isn't outwardly visible all the time, you are inherently making an invisible disability visible by having a service dog.
Yes.
And so that's a really big hurdle for a lot of people, is like, I could probably go about my day with a lot of difficulty without my dog and like be passable. Like people wouldn't really know I'm disabled unless we had an intense interaction. But I have my service dog with me, so now everyone knows I'm disabled.
Exactly.
Especially in the churches, like, let's heal you. And I'm like, well, it's not really how it works, but okay.
That, and I know for me, the answer that I started giving people when I don't mind if people want to pray for me, because God's made it really clear to me that he has allowed this in my life to bring him glory and to point, and to make changes for other people and to pave a pathway for other people. That doesn't mean I'm always happy with it. That doesn't mean I always enjoy having a disability. I don't enjoy it at all, mostly. But I just find that people mean well when they want to pray for you, but it can be really intrusive. So I sort of just let them pray and do their thing and then dismiss it. But it does seem like people want to fix you immediately.
That could be a whole nother
that's a whole nother thing.
Video roundtable for sure.
Somebody
I want to get
asked
to the chat because sorry.
Designated seating.
Yes. So Lily, Lily, I'm glad you're on here and thanks for sending me the info ahead of time. Yes, Lily's asking, what about designated seating at church? Does anybody have any experience with that? Suggestions? So Catherine did give the example of the dog area and the not dog area. Any other? I mean, obviously, if you're a wheelchair user, there's certain, places where it'll make more sense to be sitting. And depending on the size of your dog, there may need to be a little bit of more room than the average you.
I'll be really
good idea to have a plan if you were to have someone with a service dog come into your church of like, where would you offer them to be seated without being restrictive. So I don't love being told like you have to sit in this section because you have a service dog. Feels discriminatory to me. But being told like, hey, these seats tend to have a little bit more room in front of them, or if you wanted to watch from a lobby experience, there's a little bit more room for you to kind of take up space there, or like we have this space that's you can kind of tuck behind this pillar. Like I know all of the seats in my own church that I work in that have a little bit of extra space, and we actually have 3 service dog teams that are a part of our church, and so we've worked through that of like you can take up this space and I'll go sit in this space, and then we know this team likes to sit in the lobby space. So, but it took a lot to get our staff to that point of noticing that a service dog team has entered the church and then offering them those spaces because we know that it works for whatever size dog.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And I think if you have a child, like you have a child that had a traumatic experience, the traumatic experience of somebody else cannot override the need of the person to have the service dog with them.
Yeah. So let me read this because if people don't have access to the chat either live or later for the recording. So Lisa shared that she has a child who's petrified of dogs because of a prior traumatic situation, but she has families who use service dogs in Lifeline, that's her ministry, and in church. So they prepare Emily and wherever possible meet ahead of time or take a minute or two for an introduction, and then they choose seating appropriately. Sometimes Emily wants to be close enough to see the animal and verify where they are and what they're doing. And other times she prefers to sit on the opposite side away from the animal. Families have always been great about giving Em space to acclimate when they become part of her world. As parents/ministry leaders, we've always told Emily that we won't let anyone take away her wheelchair, and accordingly, we won't take away someone else's service animal. And we have to work together to figure out what works for both. Lisa, I love that. And that's like a really great lesson too. And Kayla, I think that's what you were saying too. Like, you want to be accommodating, but not back down for what you need personally for access to. So I love that. Before we go, any last thoughts or questions? I think it's been a great discussion.
I appreciated in the chat, I forgot her name already, what she said about comparing the service dog to a wheelchair. And that's very helpful that service dogs are considered medical equipment. And to have that kind of frame of mind when you're thinking about them. And I purposely got a black dog because they're generally less approachable.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, if you have a fluffy white poodle, like people are like, oh, look at your dog. I'm like, no, thank you. So I purposely got a black dog. My first service dog in training was a Doberman. What's happening?
Her shirt says "Can't touch this."
Yes, yes, I love it. Yeah, so you don't want people making kissy faces at your dog, talking to your dog. Natasha is not my dog's real name. When people ask her name, I say, this is my service dog, Natasha Romanoff. And people think, oh, Black Widow, and it puts them back in their head and not kind of in my space. And also that way they can't call out my dog's real name. I learned this from Kayla, that you have your public dog name, and that is also for her, it's the no command. For us, it's the stay command. So people are like, oh, Natasha, she's like, and she doesn't engage. But yeah, so when you're thinking about service dogs, think about, okay, would I do this to a wheelchair? Then I shouldn't do it to a service dog. You don't touch wheelchairs, you don't touch service dogs. You don't make.
And then of course that we know that there are people that don't understand that you shouldn't go up and be like touching people's wheelchairs either. But
yes,
that's another topic.
But yes, I just appreciated that frame of mind is extremely.
That's a really good visual, really good framework. So, well, thank you, everybody. This has been enlightening for me. I hope that you can use this information, take it back to your churches. And I just want to invite you we do these conversations on different topics the third Wednesday of each month at this time. We also have on the first Monday of each month at noon Eastern, we just do an open discussion. So we don't come in with a particular topic. It's just a time to ask questions, to brainstorm, to get encouragement, to give encouragement. So we invite you to join us for that. That's all on the events page. And of course, our big conference is coming up. So Disability in the Church 2023 is happening in Cleveland, Ohio at the end of April. And yes, everything that is on our events page. So keyministry.org/events. And Melissa, you asked, how do you get on the Monday, the idea shares? If you go to the events page, sign up for the next idea share. It's the same Zoom link every month, and we'll send it to you every month. So, so again, thank you, everybody. Thanks for the shout out, Candy. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.